Good morning and welcome to Munich's Säbener Straße. You're watching Quasi Read, one of our youth talents, with Jupp Heynckes standing there in the background next to Felix Götze. It might be difficult for me to tell you exactly who's on the pitch today, considering the clothes that some of the players are wearing. Sven Ulreich without a scarf and a hat here, but we'll certainly see some more pictures in a minute that show us just how cold it is. You can see here's Arjen Robben, Thomas Müller. It'll be interesting to see how much of this training session Thomas Müller is actually going to be a part of today. Yesterday he took part in the warm-up session, in the warm-up part. Here we have Robert Lewandowski. I see James, Javi Martinez, Rafinha, Arturo Vidal, Juan Bernat. So it seems that everyone who was here yesterday is back on the pitch. No surprises there, I suppose, including, and then this is new, of course, Robert Lewandowski. So yeah, slowly but surely we are setting the sights on the weekend match, the Bavarian derby against Augsburg in the Allianz Arena, in which Jupp Heynckes intends, of course, to extend his incredible winning series. Yesterday we already had a public training session here, and as is normal during these national team breaks, during qualification and international test game breaks, there's a lot of reserve players in Jupp Heynckes' squad. Let's have a look over here. This is the side pitch. It seems as if training is over there. I was fortunate enough to watch Franck Ribéry train there for at least half an hour, 45 minutes, something like that, earlier today. So Franck Ribéry is also working on his comeback. Jerome Boateng and David Alaba also back in Munich. Joachim Löw, the Germany coach, had decided to rest Jerome Boateng in the test games, in the test game against England, and in tonight's test game of Germany against France, which is of course particularly interesting for Bayern Munich as it features so many players, at least potentially, with Mats Hummels, Joshua Kimmich, Sebastian Rudi and Niklas Süle possibly playing for Germany, and Corentin Tolisso and Kingsley Coman, of course, for France. So here's Holger Broich and the warm-up program for Bayern Munich. If you've been watching these live training sessions in the last couple of years, it's interesting to see how every coach has a different approach, how every training, not session, but every training regime is different. Under Jupp Heynckes, Holger Broich is, it seems, more in control there. He conducts these training sessions alone. The assistant managers, Peter Hermann and Hermann Galland, don't get involved in that at all, really. Holger Broich, yesterday already the players run a couple of laps before they then started with some more specialized warm-up programs. As you know, this is something that I always mention, we are not necessarily seeing the tip of the iceberg, but only a part of this training session. The players at Bayern Munich have to be at Säbener Straße at the training facilities an hour before the training begins, latest. And then they tend to warm up themselves. It kind of depends on the individual players. Some like to warm up a little bit, sit on a bike, do some weights occasionally. Also, Kimmich is a player who said he doesn't really like to do weights. You might have seen there was an interesting report that we had half a year ago, so with Joshua Kimmich, where he talked about the different surroundings, the different exercises that players conduct. He mentioned that goalkeepers, the center backs, work a little more with weights because they want to have some more muscles. They want to be a little more intimidating physically, whereas midfielders, wingers, for instance, don't like to carry too much weight around. Obviously, they need speed, they need to be explosive, and therefore train differently. They'll train with their own body weight a little more. Again, lots of youth players here. The man in blonde, if you haven't watched the last couple of training sessions, is Rafinha with the new haircut. Again, with Javi Martinez, Robert Lewandowski, Arjen Robben, James Rodriguez, Rafinha, Juan Bernat, and Thomas Müller, as well as Tom Starke, Sven Ulreich, and Arturo Vidal. As you can hear, quite a few pros in training today. And then we have Franck Ribéry, David Alaba, Jerome Boateng, who are all at least at Säbener Street and working individually. That means Jupp Heynckes has quite a few players at his disposal. We talked about this in the last couple of days with Jupp Heynckes, and he, of course, mentioned how difficult it is. After he joined Bayern Munich, he, of course, joined Bayern in the last national team break and talked about the difficulty of training properly, of actually working with the players in terms of system, tactics, philosophy, and so on. This national team break will also make it difficult for Jupp Heynckes, even though there are so many players here, will make it difficult for Jupp Heynckes to work specifically on tactics, although he's changed so much already. Heynckes is banking on the winter break in particular to actually have his team together for a couple of weeks and to then specifically work on a couple of things that he would like to change. Here's Franck Ribéry, so he's obviously still out on the pitch. There are 9 games left in 2017 before the winter break begins. A couple days before Christmas, I think, on the 21st, the last competitive game of 2017 is on December 20th, the home knockout cup match against Dortmund. Ribéry certainly might be ready for that already. He's not going to get involved next week against Augsburg already, and it remains to be seen if Franck Ribéry can get involved. As I said, 9 games for Bayern remaining in a little more than a month, and Jupp Heynckes already clearly indicated Ribéry is one of these players that are much too valuable for him, much too important for him to take any risks with in terms of Ribéry's health. So I assume that he's going to let him recover fully and then carefully reintegrate him. We're not quite sure what the situation with David Alaba is, who returned from the Austrian national team. Seems to have some minor issues. Of course, right now on your screen, I think he's just left it again, we saw Juan Bernat, who is apparently pretty close to his comeback. Juan Bernat will certainly be welcomed with open arms, particularly if David Alaba should, as it seems at least, have some issues. There he is at the center. But again, Robert Lewandowski back as well. James also back. Again, Vidal not with the national team. Arjen Robben retired recently after Holland failed to qualify for the World Cup. And of course, yesterday the same happened to Italy. It's going to be an interesting World Cup with so many big nations missing. For Bayern, of course, the good news is that the players are willing to return to do without the odd test game and friendly game and rather concentrate on Bayern Munich and on their work with Jupp Heynckes. So this is a change compared to what we saw in the last couple of months, really. A very extensive warm-up program. Of course, important during this kind of weather condition as well. It's become very, very cold in Munich today, and the next couple of days are apparently supposed to be quite beautiful and sunny, but it is cold, and you can really feel the winter coming on here, which is why the players not only warm up properly out here, but as I mentioned earlier, they are always at Munich Säbener Street an hour before training begins. Warm up in the gym, either collectively or individually. Kind of depends on the age of the players, of course. Some of the older players like to warm up for a very long time, and then also after training they like to wind down. Again, very individually, absolutely depends on what the player prefers. Someone like Arjen Robben has very clear and specific ideas of what he expects of a day of training, and that means preparing and also, again, winding down properly, making sure that everything's in mint condition. That might include a massage, and not necessarily every day, but quite regularly. So here, as you can see, there's a build-up in these exercises, and it's good to see that Thomas Müller is already at least able to train fairly intensely. I don't think if we looked at it just now, he went 100%. And Juan Bernat looking very good as well. I've mentioned this a few times, and if you've heard it before, forgive me. I felt so disappointed for Juan Bernat, who did such a great job during preseason in particular, and I thought showed his most promising season performance last season, although it was certainly not an easy performance for him. But I thought after the preseason, or towards the end of the preseason, that Bernat really might give David Alaba a run for his money this season. And then, of course, he was out for a couple of months with his injury, so it'll be interesting to see what happens now, particularly, as I said, if David Alaba is out. James also played one test match for the Colombian national team in South Korea. Against South Korea, Colombia lost by 2-1. And then James was supposed to travel on to China for the next test match, but then decided it makes more sense to return to Munich. Good news for Jupp Heynckes, who had described this test match, or these two test matches, as madness, saying that nowadays the players are under such pressure, and there's so much that's demanded of them. It's just, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's just too much. Again, for a European player like Robert Lewandowski, it's a bit different. You get on a plane, and after 2 or 3 hours you reach your destination, you play your game. Of course, a break would be better, and players like, going back, let's say, to last season, like Philipp Lahm or Xabi Alonso, always commented on how important and how valuable and beneficial these breaks are, just to have a weekend off, just to be able to switch off mentally as well. But again, if you're a European player, well, you get on a plane, you stay in your time zone, and you play a game. It's not that much different, at least on paper, as it would be playing a Champions League game or playing for Bayern Munich. For the South Americans in particular, it's a whole different story. Traveling across the globe, thousands and thousands of miles into a completely different time zone with a time change. Here's Arturo Vidal, who's a great example, because he returned to Munich so late on several occasions. Basically returned, you would have him return on a Thursday night or a Thursday morning after a red-eye flight somewhere from South America, arrive in Munich, again completely different time zone, jet-lagged, and then they're expected to come to Säbener Street and perform and train properly and then do well the next day. It is, as Jupp Heynckes here has said, absolute madness. Heynckes used the first week of this last national team break of the year 2017 for a little bit of a holiday for himself. He joined Bayern Munich, and then, as always, when he's in Munich, and it's been, of course, 3 times previously, he's just working day and night. He's been asked a couple of times in the press conferences in the last few weeks if he's had the opportunity to go home occasionally or to relax, and he laughs it off and says, so you don't know what this job entails, and explained why this is basically a 24-hour job and how he is fully committed to it. But again, the last week was certainly good for him as well. He was able to go home for a couple of days, visit his wife, who he hadn't seen for a few weeks, switch off himself, recharge the batteries for this last stretch. And again, a month of football with 9 games. Then the players, I expect from the 20th onwards, probably till New Year's, they'll have a 10-day break, a little holiday, and then January 2nd, Bayern Munich lift off to Qatar for a very short training camp, and then return to Munich, where the second half of the season already recommences. It is a busy life for a football professional, particularly on this level, particularly if you're a national team player like James, like Robin was, like Robert Lewandowski. James, by the way, later on we're going to have a short interview with James. At least we're going to try to get him in front of the camera and have a word or two with him after this training session. So later on in the day you can maybe check on that and see if you can catch a couple of statements about James. We'll want to try and find out why he's back in Munich already and what he thinks about his personal development in the last couple of weeks, which I think the Bayern fans all agree was very, very pleasing indeed. Joined Bayern Munich, had some difficulties, I wouldn't want to say integrating, but integrating into the game of Bayern Munich. Maybe it was more of a player of his Bayern teammates who are used to very different types of players on the wingers, with Robin, with Coman, with Costa last year, with Ribéry. You have very fast players, or at least players who want individual action to occur. They challenge their opponents. If you look at Ribéry, who always runs at defenses, and James is a very different player, doesn't have that speed, doesn't have that dribbling ability, but is a connecting player, someone who wants to combine with his teammates, who takes them on board. It was a wonderful shot, wonderful long-range pass, great vision for scenes, and has absolutely improved and developed into a very interesting player indeed for Bayern Munich in the last couple of weeks. We all knew that he was a very interesting player when he joined, but again, after a couple of weeks of problems integrating, after 1 or 2 minor injuries, which he fortunately overcame quite quickly, James has been able to show a string of convincing performance recently, and that's of course fantastic. So Robert Lewandowski back in training. That's, I suppose, the big news of the day, that he's returned to Munich. But again, we have been training. Let's have a look at about 20 minutes now. And I like the fact that Thomas Müller is still in this group. With James, of course, Bayern Munich has an alternative for Müller, so Jupp Heynckes isn't going to take too many risks there. Rafinha, I assume, will at least have a very realistic chance of playing against Augsburg this weekend. David Alaba was unable to play with the Austrian national team and is in Munich but hasn't trained with the team, which doesn't indicate that he's in any condition to play competitive football, which means that either Juan Bernat or Rafinha will have to fill in for him, and Bernat, we'll see. I'm fairly positive and optimistic that Juan Bernat will be able to help. Here he is. No, sorry, that's Niklas Dorsch. Will be able to help the Bayern team within the next couple of weeks in that 9-game stretch, and maybe be successfully reintegrated. We hope that's going to be the case, but Rafinha, I'm fairly sure, will have quite a few games coming up for him. Also, Quasi Reed is here. Very refreshing young man, a very likable guy who's down to earth and who really enjoyed playing in the DFB Cup against Leipzig, his professional debut. He joined the Bayern Munich reserve team at the beginning of this season from Osnabrück and has become their top striker, and also has become a regular part of Bayern Munich's training group. Jupp Heynckes likes him, likes the way he plays. He's certainly got a knack for goal scoring. And if you know anything about football, and I know, of course, all of you do, we're talking about a 4th division player in Germany. Now, 4th division doesn't sound spectacular, but if you want to play 4th division football at Bayern Munich, then in the reserve team, you need to be an absolutely outstanding, excellent football player. And never mind being an international top star, but all of these young players and all of the amateur or the reserve team players of Bayern Munich have great talent, have all the skills. It's a bit more of a mentality question, and obviously Jupp Heynckes has been impressed by Quasi Reed's mentality. Again, he celebrated his professional debut for Bayern Munich against Leipzig in the DFB Cup, and of course is using a situation to his advantage that Bayern fans in particular have been talking about for many years. Why does Bayern Munich not have any player who can function as a backup to Robert Lewandowski? It's something that's mystified me for a couple of years, to be quite honest. Karl-Heinz Rummenigge commented on it recently and said that the club officials, that means club president or club boss Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, for one, suggested that and wanted to have a replacement for or a backup for Robert Lewandowski, but said that the managerial staff, that the Bayern management didn't see the necessity for a backup, considering Thomas Müller an alternative for Robert Lewandowski, which is certainly true. But of course, the downside of that is if you want Thomas Müller to play, then you want him to be fit, you want him to play regularly, and you don't want him to sit on the bench as a backup for Robert Lewandowski. So it seems as if at least the attempts are being made right now to get into touch with some strikers who can imagine backing up Robert Lewandowski in future. Of course, it's all open to speculation. Young, ambitious players that can challenge him on the one hand, or do you want to have a experienced, reliable guy who knows what he's doing, a Bundesliga, let's say 200 match plus striker who knows what to do, who is a pure replacement. Again, it will be answered in winter or not. Jupp Heynckes said quite clearly that he would like, if possible, to hire a replacement there, fully well knowing, of course, that that's difficult to achieve in winter. So let's see what the coaches have up their staff now. I think certainly the warm-up program's over, and we had a couple of passing exercise here, and we might have a little game coming up. I'm trying to look outside of the screen at this guy here, Thomas Müller. Be interesting to see now if he can stay on the pitch or not. Peter Hermann organizing the next exercise. Javi Martinez seems fine and already a little bit better than yesterday. For instance, I watched him yesterday in training. He showed a very good training performance overall, but every once in a while you could see that he was still touching his shoulder, stretching his shoulder a little bit, working on that. Sustained a shoulder injury, of course, a couple of weeks ago. Then had a head injury as well that he sustained while scoring a goal for Bayern. Probably a bit of a new environment for James as well. I'm not sure if he's ever trained in conditions like this. Probably prior to a Champions League game, I'm sure he's trained in the cold, but to train regularly at your home club in this kind of a weather, I don't think James is used to that, but Brazilians tend to get used to it after a while. Some never do, I suppose. But if you look at Rafinha here, of course, he's been in Germany for such a long time, but he's one of those guys, come hell or high water, he's not wearing long trousers. No, thank you. So this is Thomas Müller who just touched the ball. I find that very encouraging to see. We might see Müller stay where he is right now. He's on that line at the front of your screen, so he's not getting involved in the infights here. At least not yet. This is Sven Ulreich, also there to practice his footwork. And you can see in the background, Müller's not really getting involved like Martinez or Ulreich are. So, yesterday, again, Müller was part of the warm-up program, part of the first passing exercises, but didn't keep playing in this kind of exercises. Now he's taking the next little step, joining in but not fully getting involved. I've mentioned this a few times in these training sessions as well. What's fascinating to me and what is a major difference, and it's up to the individual player, I suppose, or the fan to decide how important it really is, but one absolutely crucial, massive change in the training sessions of Jupp Heynckes compared to his predecessors, Carlo Ancelotti and Pep Guardiola, is simply the language barrier. You can see in this training session, if you listen to it, Peter Hermann is constantly talking to the players. He's commenting on every single pass. He tells the players what to do. You might have heard it earlier, and I'll shut up in a minute so that you can hear him again. He's talking about where to play the ball to. If it gets too crowded in the center, to get that pass out. He gives praise. He criticizes the players at the same time, or alternately criticizes or praises them depending on what the situation is. And that's so different, again, because of the language barrier, because we simply didn't have at Bayern Munich any German-speaking coaches with the language skills to do that. So let's have a look, or let's have a listen, I should say, more to Peter Hermann than to me. Felix Götze on the left, Niklas Dorsch was just now in front of Arturo Vidal. Vidal certainly with a, I don't know if a disappointing season is the right term, but it's not a season yet in which he's been able to play the pivotal role that he wants to himself, and that he has already played at Bayern Munich. Vidal has this unbelievable ability, really second to none in terms of intercepting opposition attacks, winning possession for his team. It's quite incredible. I'm sure you'll agree. You've seen it all before many times, and he tends to do that particularly well, I always think, in the really big games. So that's something that's made him very, very popular with the Bayern fans and also with his teammates in recent years here in Munich, that he's just helped the team. Again, non-stop commentary by Peter Hamann. Don't stay in one square is what Peter Hamann says. You try to get out quicker, try to change from one square to the other faster. Here he is. You might remember that it took a couple of days between the first rumors surfacing that Jupp Heynckes might return and then his actual signature at Bayern Munich. This guy on the right is, and now on the left, is the reason. Peter Hamann was very successful as the assistant of Friedhelm Funkel at Düsseldorf. They were table leaders in the second division, and it took a couple of days for Bayern Munich to basically come to terms with Düsseldorf and agree a transfer fee on assistant manager Peter Hamann. But Jupp Heynckes insisted he needed his right-hand man, and I think it's quite evident when you look at these training sessions why that is. Good news here for, for all of us. This is another thing. Jupp Heynckes constantly talking to the players, constantly building a rapport with the players, and of course Heynckes speaks Spanish fluently, very well, and thus has a great in with all of these South American and Spanish-speaking players at Bayern Munich. Again, Müller, we just saw, didn't get fully involved in this last exercise, but he's already handling the ball. He's already participating, if with a handbrake pulled in this exercise. And again, it's a next little step for Müller, who I'm pretty sure will certainly be involved in the competitive games coming up for Bayern Munich in the next couple of weeks. When exactly his first game will be, I'm not sure, of course. We have Augsburg coming up on the weekend, then the away game in Brussels against Anderlecht. And as I mentioned, Jupp Heynckes has alternatives for Müller. Heynckes likes to field Müller in the center, of course, behind Lewandowski, but James can play that. This season already, we've had Vidal play it, Thiago play it. Martinez has a place booked for him in holding midfield. Rafinha, as I said, we'll probably see play left back in the next couple of games. And that's a player that we all know, of course, that Bayern Munich can rely on. And Peter Hamann again, telling everyone what to do at all times. Martinez, a little hurt here. But I think he's just going to walk it out. Man shouting at the top of his voice in the background is Arjen Robben. Mario Czernicki on the left and Niklas Dorsch. For those of you who've watched these training sessions or follow the amateurs, you know all of these players. Felix Götze now, the younger brother of Mario in the center. Derek Cohn at the front here of your screen. As I said, Quasi, nicknamed Ochi Reed. Yesterday, Niklas Tarnat was in the training group. I haven't seen him here today. The reserve team, of course. Yeah, on the one hand, I'm sure Coach Tim Walter appreciates the opportunity for his young players to learn how it is to train with these professionals in this professional environment. And don't forget that even with the competitive nature, of course, of 4th Division football for the reserve team, for a reserve team coach of a major club, there's always two important issues. One is sporting success on the pitch, but more importantly, really, of course, you want to help develop young players, and a training session like this can certainly help. On the other hand, it's difficult, of course, for a reserve team coach to build a team and to have players, young players, play to their capability if they hardly ever train with each other. Reserve team in a bit of a difficult situation anyway this season. They've been in the 4th Division for a couple of years now, and no one really happy about that in Munich, of course. The rule is that there has to be one division in between the pro and the reserve team, which means that the reserve team could, in theory, play 3rd Division football. And of course, in the past, the reserve team has played 3rd Division football for many years. So that's always the ultimate goal of Bayern Munich, to have them play in the 3rd Division and do fairly well there. Hasn't worked out for a couple of years. Won't work out this year. It's not likely, at least with 1860 being relegated down all the way from the 2nd to the 4th Division and taking control of that. They are the table leaders there, despite a bit of a bad spell at the moment. That will prevent Bayern Munich, it seems, at least from winning the league. And even if you do win the league, you still go into playoffs for promotion. So it doesn't seem as if the Bayern reserve team is going up to the 3rd Division any time soon, despite the fact that there are certainly some interesting talents in there. Talents, of course, big issue at Bayern Munich as well. Thomas Müller, and yeah, not necessarily one of the last players to make it into the pro team at Bayern. David Alaba is another example, but haven't been many in the last couple of years. Interestingly enough, there's all kinds of rumors now linking Emre Can to a return to the Bundesliga, who never really had the opportunity to play for their first team, but that's exactly the problem that Bayern Munich face, as does every other European top team, really. Nowadays, these squads are so strong. There's such a high level of skill and experience in these squads that it's just virtually impossible for a 17, 18-year-old to make it on this level. Unfortunately, history in football shows us that young players need to play if they want to be successful. Otherwise, they lose the most important formative years of their career. And that's why putting players out on loan is becoming ever more popular for these top clubs, and obviously that makes a lot of sense. So next exercise about to beginning, if I'm not mistaken. It's without Thomas Müller. I think he's left this group now. At least that's what he did yesterday. After a while, he discontinued the team training to work a little more on his individual fitness. And again, depending on this exercise, it looks to me as if it's some kind of a passing exercise, which I'm sure Thomas Müller could join in, but the physicians at Bayern, the physical therapists, obviously know very well what the player needs right now. Might be a bit too easy for him. He might need a little more physical work now. I think he's left. I'm not 100% sure, to be quite honest. In case you're wondering, by the way, there's a big construction site in the background. This is where the former youth academy of Bayern Munich stood. It was on the right of your screen now, and on the left, where there's basically a big hole now, there was an indoor sports hall. But again, that whole building was torn down now to make space for more office buildings here. And of course, this is all a consequence of Bayern Munich opening the FC Bayern campus in the north of Munich to have the youth teams play there. Also, the women's team trains there now. Beautiful environment, beautiful setup in Munich. If you ever have the chance maybe to see a FC Bayern women's game, or an amateur game, or a youth game. Of course, the Bayern reserves still play in the Grünwalder stadium, but if you have the chance maybe to see a youth game, if you're interested, I can only recommend it. Nice little stadium there, and just generally great facility for Bayern Munich. So here, exercise. Robin's obviously already unhappy with it. That means it's got to be good. It's got to be demanding. If Robin's angry and walks away like that, it means he's going to be twice as motivated the next time. Now to see Vidal and Martinez here is no a big surprise, but again, I have to say I'm very happy to see this guy here at the front, Juan Bernat, train fully, and he has been doing so for a couple of days now. It seems as if he's maybe already a candidate for the squad on the weekend. Again, I'd be surprised if Heinkes fielded him. I can imagine we'll see Kimmich and Rafinha in the fullback positions. Well, that scene here isn't going to make Robin any happier. Just missed that opportunity against Ulreich. Here is Bernat. This is Archie Reed. Right behind Lewandowski, and that's exactly where Jupp Heynckes wants him to be. Beautiful solo move there by James. This is Niklas Dorsch, one of Bayern's certainly more promising talented players. Reed, Rafinha on the right. He's got a shooting chance and he's going to take it. Bernat on the left. These are the kind of exercises that we haven't seen here for a while, and what it reflects is what Jupp Heynckes talked about and has been talking about ever since he returned. And he said, whatever you want the players to do on the weekend or during the week in a competitive environment, in a competitive match on the pitch, they have to know what to do. They have to have experienced it. They have to have gone through the motions a couple times. That's why you need these exercises. Obviously a different philosophy to his predecessor, but it works for Jupp Heynckes. Having 3 players run up against 2 here and you can hear again Peter Hamann is constantly commenting, constantly telling the players what to do, how to move, how to position themselves, how to get into a situation to make it virtually impossible for the defenders to defend against them. Didn't work this time. You might think it's a bit unfair to have 3 players run up against 2 here, but the exercise obviously is to practice how to create goals, so the disadvantage given to the attackers for a reason. And hey, don't forget, or at least just now, this is now Felix Götze with Derek Korn, but just now we had Martinez and Vidal as the defending lads there. There's certainly an easier pairs to get past. Bernat again. Now in the center, Rafinha, Bernat takes a shot, blocked by Martinez and Tom Starke. So I have to take that back. I'm pretty sure now, despite hats and scarves in the way, that I saw Thomas Müller just now. Again, it would have been a little bit weird for him to probably leave. I'm not sure if I'm maybe mixing it up with Robert Lewandowski here. They're all wearing the same things, same scarves, same hats. It's an exercise, at least it seems to me, that Müller should be able to conduct, although I suppose running up against the defenders, there is a risk of full contact there. Harry and Robin, that's just going to make his mood worse and worse. Rafinha, Bernat, Rafinha, Vidal. In real life, that's probably a penalty. James tries a magic chip forward to Arjen Robben. I have to honestly say I'm not 100% sure if Thomas Müller is still part of this exercise or not. The longer I look at this, the more I'm thinking, no, maybe not. Maybe, and I suppose in a way that would make sense. The coaches are just insisting he avoid any physical contact or any risk of clashing with his teammates. You saw it in the exercise earlier where Müller was involved but stayed out of the zone, basically stayed out of the full contact zone. And here I suppose it's a similar situation because you are running up against defenders who are fighting tooth and nail to prevent goals. So I assume Müller's either back in the gym or on the side pitch here conducting more individual exercises. That would be according to schedule, and that would be what we expected to see of him today. We're going to stay on air for a couple more minutes, 5 more minutes or so. We've been on air nearly for an hour now, and yeah, the training session will probably last a little longer, a couple more minutes, maybe 20 minutes or so, but there'll be more of these kind of exercises. Again, a good little mix here in this national team break between physical exercises, quite a bit of stabilization, endurance, fitness exercises taking place here, and then combined with a couple of tactical exercises. Robert Lewandowski laughs at the fact that Vidal basically just crushed him. And look at here, who do we have in the background? Jerome Boateng, David Alaba running laps around the pitch. Thumbs up there by Jerome Boateng. That's very good to hear. They're not in team training today, as you can see, so that leaves room for you and me to interpret exactly what their condition is, but they're outdoors, they're running laps around the pitch, they're not too far away from squad fitness, I suppose. And again, of course, neither of them have had a long injury break now or anything. They should be fine. Boateng's had some muscle injuries and some issues with muscles for a long time now. He explained it too. He said, I've just been training too hard. I've tried too often to come back from injury too soon after years and years in which he basically always played and very rarely missed a competitive game. Boateng now has had, I have to be honest, say here, a year or two with a lot of injuries, particularly muscle injuries. But he said he's had problems where he hurt his shoulder, for instance, then started too soon because of a shoulder injury. He then just didn't run properly, didn't put proper or evenly balanced strain on his legs. That then again put too much strain on certain muscles, and it's of course a common thing. He commented too, Boateng, and said that now that he's experienced such a long injury, he's certainly going to change a couple things and rethink his attitude towards bouncing back from injury. But let's hope that he can get a grip on these muscle issues which have been accompanying him for a while now. He's got the ideal coach and he's got an ideal environment. Of course, as a competitive player, you want to play all the time, and it's normal to be maybe a little bit worried too to lose your position, but with Niklas Süle, Jupp Heynckes and Bayern Munich just have a really good alternative to Jerome Boateng in defense. There's no need, just like Thomas Müller, for instance, no need really to press the issue and to overdo it. So So let's summarize. Maybe we've got a couple more days to go before Bayern Munich start their last stretch of games. 9 competitive games in a little more than a month of football. We'll have news programs in the upcoming days. We're planning a news every day starting tomorrow. We'll be leading up to the Augsburg game to keep you informed of what goes on. But today the news that Lewandowski returned to training, James is back in training, Boateng and Alaba on the pitch, Bernat looks fit, Vidal is here and looks fit as well. Tomorrow I assume some of the German internationals will return, at least to Munich. I'm not quite sure if they're going to be in training or not, but you can find all of these things out in our news program tomorrow. Later on today, we're at least planning. It's not 100% certain, but we're going to try to get James in front of the camera, get a couple statements out, and ask him how it feels to be back in Munich, how he's looking forward to the upcoming games, and what he thinks about his development, particularly in the last few weeks where he's really done a very good job for Bayern. So, as always, you'll be informed extensively and thoroughly by us. Stay tuned to FCB TV and our website in the next couple of days for everything around Bayern Munich, or enjoy the last couple of days without competitive club football before the last really busy stretch begins, starting with Augsburg on the weekend and ending with the highlight game, I suppose, the DFB Knockout Cup home match against Dortmund. There's also an interesting little group stage game against Paris that's coming our way. Group stage away game in Brussels against Anderlecht. So all kinds of highlights waiting around the corner for Bayern Munich and for the Bayern fans. Stay tuned to all of that. Hope you enjoyed this training session here today. I think there's quite a bit of good news coming from Munich Säbener Street, and that's what we want to see going into this last stretch of the season. Last little competitive exercise about to begin. But again, we're going to leave it at that. Give you just wanted to give you an idea of who's back, who's not back, what the situation in Munich is. It's beautiful weather for football training, but more importantly, everyone who we expected to see out on the pitch is out on the pitch, and that is good news for Bayern Munich.